Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Today I'm going to talk very briefly about straw men, in particular what's called the straw man fallacy, or more properly, attacking a straw man. The basic concept of attacking a straw man is that instead of attacking your opponent, you construct a man out of straw, that is something very easy to defeat, which you then attack instead, and having defeated the straw man, you then claim victory over the actual man. This is a metaphor for constructing a very bad, easy-to-defeat argument instead of the argument which somebody has proposed, defeating that argument you constructed, and then saying that you defeated the argument of the man. This is very often done by taking some very extreme or poorly thought out thing, which sounds kind of similar to what the man did, and attacking that instead. You can find plenty of examples if you search all over. This is very commonly misunderstood on the internet, where you will find lots of people who think that it is attacking a straw man to talk about the logical implications of somebody's belief. So, for example, if a man says human beings don't have free will, everything they do is predetermined. They have no control over it, they cannot do anything, they're mere cogs in a machine. It would not be a straw man to then talk about the implications of this on morality, that if you believe that all human beings have predetermined actions, that there cannot be such a thing as exculpation because something was out of a person's control. Because, according to the position, literally everything is outside of the person's control. Nothing is within a person's control, and therefore it cannot be an exculpating factor that a thing was outside of a person's control. Even though the man did not say this, this is in fact one of the logical implications of what he did say. And so talking about how this is wrong, and therefore, because this is logically necessitated by his position, what he said is wrong, is a perfectly legitimate way to argue. This is in fact pretty much the way you have to argue. There's pretty much nothing but this sort of arguing. And you will see all the time on the internet people who seem to think that a straw man is anything at all that the original person didn't say. And they just misunderstand this. I think because they don't understand logic at all. But you'll see lots of people who think that if what you're doing is attacking anything that isn't exactly word for word what the original person said, you're attacking a straw man. It's just not true at all. You have to, in order to figure out whether or not something is a straw man, find out whether or not it is a consequence of the person's position or logically equivalent to the person's position. So, for example, if somebody says that life has the meaning that you give it, this is equivalent to saying that life has no meaning. Because the meaning that you give it is just, what you are pretending that it has. Now, they will not like the fact that what they have said is equivalent to saying life has no meaning, but I'm going to pretend that it does. But it is equivalent to that. There is no way in which to draw a distinction. The two things are entirely the same. It is not a straw man to take something that is wrapped in a rhetorical package, unwrap the rhetoric around it, and lay bare the thing that is actually being said. This also is not attacking a straw man, and if you do this, if you unpack the rhetoric and show in a more... rhetoric-free would be a little bit of an exaggeration, but in a much plainer way, what it is that they are saying. If you take away the noble tone of voice, the tilt of the head, life shall have the meaning that we give it. Well, it's the same thing as saying, life doesn't have any meaning, but I'm going to pretend that it does. It's the same actual thing is being referred to. The words point to reference in reality. The words are reference. They point to something. They refer to something in reality. And you can have the high and mighty noble thing pointing to the exact same thing as the thing that sounds pretty pathetic. It is not a straw man to show that these two things point to the same thing in reality and then to discuss the one in preference to the other. There is absolutely no requirement in logical discussion to use a rhetorically powerful statement of a person's position than to use a rhetorically weak statement of that person's position. It is, again, not a straw man, as long as the two things are in fact equivalent, to substitute the rhetorically weak version of his argument. So that's just the sort of the other thing that you'll see get called straw man all the time. And primarily, it's primarily in my observation, and this is just a statistical observation, by people who do not understand logic and do not understand reason, and have entirely rhetorical positions. That is to say, they like the sound of something. The sort of the position feels good. The words feel good. They haven't thought them through. It doesn't mean anything to them. They just like the sound and sort of go with that. And so when you translate this out of that rhetoric into some other sort of way of presenting the exact same idea, it doesn't feel the same to them, and so they reject it. That's not my idea. My idea was this bold one, stated with your head in the air and your fist triumphantly raised. Not some meek little thing, even though they mean the same thing. It's because the person's purely rhetorically thinking that it's the rhetoric that they've latched onto, not the idea, and that's why they don't recognize it as the same thing when you translate it. So whenever you run into rhetorical thinkers, that is to say people who think in rhetoric, not in ideas, people who think in the more modern parlance, feels, not facts, then you're going to run into this. They will call anything that is not their rhetorical position a straw man, because they don't recognize it, because the thing that they actually liked is the rhetoric, not the idea. Just a hazard of being on the internet, and since observationally it seems like most people are rhetorical thinkers rather than thinkers in ideas, you're going to see stuff about straw man thrown around a lot that does not apply at all. And the unfortunate thing is you're probably not going to, in fact, be able to show them this because they're rhetorical thinkers, not ideas. So you're going to want to use something more along the lines of counter-rhetoric, just pointing out that it means the same thing, you're just afraid of your own ideas. And so some sort of rhetoric like that will probably help. They're going to stick to their thing anyway because they can't recognize the two things are the same idea. Unfortunately, about the only way, from what I can gather, that you can actually really affect a rhetorical thinker is just through really impressively superior rhetoric. So you need to just become an excellent rhetorician if you want to deal with rhetorical thinkers. There's a lot to that, but that's way outside of the scope of this. So that's the straw man, what it is and what it isn't. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.